Thank you. At this time, it gives me great pleasure to yield time to my colleague and good friend from California, Barbara Lee.
Thank you, and let me thank the gentlelady for yielding and for calling the special order to recognize and honor the extraordinary life of our dear friend and colleague, Congresswoman Julia May Carson. First, I'd like to offer my deepest condolences to her family, to her constituents of Indiana's 7th Congressional District, to her friends, and to her staff here in Washington, D.C. and in Indiana. For over 35 years, Congresswoman Carson championed the rights of the underprivileged, the underrepresented, and the overlooked. We came to depend on her determined leadership and commitment throughout her tenure in Congress. So a true voice for the voiceless was taken from us on December 15th. We shared many conversations about our common interests. We frequently talked about the fact that we both shared the same astrological sign. We were both Cancers. Julie's birthday was July 8th, mine July 16th. But Julia Carson was fiercely loyal and patriotic, and that supposedly is a typical characteristic of Cancers. And she exemplified these values, though, in many, many ways. Her loyalty and her patriotism was what undergirded and served as the foundation for her career in public service. After coming to the House floor to vote, oftentimes, well, in coming to the floor, I passed by her office. Oftentimes, I'd walk with Julia, and we shared many conversations, but even to this day, I notice, and I'd like for you to look at the plaque outside of her door. She has the pictures of at least 45 of Indiana's fallen men and women who have served this country. She kept their pictures in her office. She loved the troops. She loved her district. She loved our young men and women. She was a woman of courage. Congresswoman Carson was an adamant opponent of the Iraq War. Even though, and we talked about this a lot, it could pose political risks, but she let her conscience be her guide. I witnessed her passion for justice when I served with her on the Housing Subcommittee with Congresswoman Waters, her passion for the homelessness and seeking justice for public housing recipients. What a woman, what a woman. She just very recently, even with her debilitating illness, several months ago, she came to me and she asked me to help her, and we were putting this together, to put together another visit to South Africa. She wanted to lead a code out. And of course, her health would not allow for this exhausting trip. But I will always remember, up until a couple of months ago, her optimism and her determination to go back to South Africa. She wouldn't take no for an answer. So we're going to miss Congresswoman Carson tremendously. I'm reminded of the scriptures, Timothy 4, chapter 7. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. And I have remained faithful. Madam Speaker, Congresswoman Julia Carson fought hard. She fought hard for peace and for justice all of her life. And she completed her work on this earth, but it's up to us to pick up that baton and to move it forward in her memory. And she remained faithful. She remained faithful to the end, to her family, her friends, her constituents, her country, and most importantly, to her God. May her soul rest in peace. And I ask for unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks. Thank you.
I now would like to yield time to the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Danny Davis.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I want to thank the gentlelady from Ohio for yielding. And I'm pleased to join with my colleagues as we pay tribute to Representative Julia Carson. Julia and I were elected at the same time and soon discovered that we knew many of the same people because a large number of individuals from the town where I grew up migrated to Indianapolis and became very much involved in the affairs of the city. We also discovered that Julia and my cousin were good friends because they were the longest serving African Americans elected in Indiana. They both had been trustees for a long time. Julia in Indianapolis and Doja Allen in Gary and Calumet City. But Julia and I worked together on something called responsible fatherhood legislation that we had been working with Senator Evan Bayh from Indiana and Senator Barack Obama from Illinois. And we've introduced that legislation and actually planned to give it a real push in 2008. If we're able to really move it, I'd like to see us actually name it the Julia Carson Responsible Fatherhood legislation. And so it's been a pleasure working with Julia. She actually would drive. Well, she wouldn't always drive herself, but sometimes she would, from Indianapolis to Chicago. We had a hearing at the Federal Reserve Bank, and I get there, downtown Chicago. There's Julia in her van coming to testify. And all of us knew that she had been ill. All of us knew the difficulty that she had. And I said, Julia, how did you get here? She said, ain't nothing but a little spout. And so, Julia, we're going to miss you. You were a brave soul, had a great heart. Julia is a legend in Indianapolis. I mean, those of us who know her here, we know her in a sense. But in Indianapolis, she's an absolute legend. And we're going to miss you, Julia. And I yield back.